The ground in Africa has just shaken with a revelation that could rewrite a nation's economic history and send shockwaves across the planet. A secret hidden beneath the arid soil, now exposed to the scorching Sahel sun, promising unimaginable wealth, and for some, a geopolitical nightmare. Brace yourselves, because Burkina Faso has just announced a gold discovery so colossal that the West is already in panic. Before we reveal the explosive details of this news that is shaking markets and chancelleries, I ask that you join our community of truth explorers by subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any details of this and other sagas that are shaping our world, a click that opens the doors to knowledge. In the silent heart of the Sahel, where the arid land had for centuries whispered secrets of resilience and suffering, a cry of euphoria broke the usual stillness, as geologists, their faces covered in the dust of hope, confirmed what had previously been only a distant dream, a discovery of gold of truly biblical proportions. A vein so vast and rich that the first estimates left even the most skeptical experts in a state of absolute shock, promising to radically transform the destiny of Burkina Faso. This was not just another mine, but a dormant treasure of legendary magnitude. The first reports, leaked amid a mix of official secrecy and unbridled excitement, painted a picture of almost unbelievable reserves, capable of catapulting Burkina Faso into the pantheon of the world's largest gold producers, news that spread like wildfire through the dusty streets of Ouagadougou and the most remote villages, lighting a flame of hope in the hearts of a people long accustomed to scarcity and the daily struggle for survival, a people who now glimpsed a future where poverty could finally be a distant memory. The technical details, although complex for the layman, were translated into a universal language of prosperity: tons and tons of pure gold, waiting to be extracted, an economic potential that could completely rewrite the national budget, finance vital infrastructure such as schools and hospitals, and generate jobs for thousands of citizens who for generations had faced the specter of unemployment and forced migration, a gift from the motherland that arrived at a crucial moment in the country's history, offering a unique chance for redemption. The exact location of the discovery was initially kept under a veil of mystery by the authorities, in an understandable attempt to avoid a mad rush and ensure that the exploration took place in an orderly and, above all, sovereign manner. But the magnitude of the find was such that the secret could not be contained for long, and news of the Golden Mountain began to feed the popular imagination, with ancient stories and legends being revived, as if the ancient spirits of the earth had finally decided to bless their children with a heavenly gift. For the people of Burkina Faso, punished by years of political instability, the constant threat of extremist groups and poverty that seemed endemic, this discovery represented much more than simple material wealth. It was a symbol of renewal, a promise of dignity, and an opportunity for the nation to finally take control of its own destiny, free from the shackles of external dependence and the impositions of a global system that so often neglected its most basic needs, a true divine gift in the middle of the desert. The spontaneous celebrations that broke out in various parts of the country were an eloquent testimony to the profound emotional impact of the news, with people dancing in the streets, singing songs of hope and thanking the heavens for that unexpected blessing, a rare moment of unity and optimism in a nation often divided by internal tensions, where the shine of gold seemed to overshadow, albeit momentarily, the shadows of the past and the uncertainties of the present, uniting everyone under the banner of a promising future. The transitional government, led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a figure already emblematic for his nationalist stance and his discourse of rupture with the neocolonial past, saw in this discovery a divine validation of its struggle for sovereignty, a powerful tool that could finally free Burkina Faso from the clutches of financial dependence and allow the construction of a truly independent and self-sufficient state. A legacy that he seemed determined to build, even if it meant challenging powerful and established interests. The news resounded like a thunderclap across global financial markets, with the price of gold gyrating and analysts trying to decipher the implications of such a massive supply coming into circulation. But for Burkinabés, the complexities of the global economy were secondary to the tangible promise of a better life, a chance to see their children grow up with access to quality education, decent healthcare, and a future where hard work was rewarded with justice and prosperity. not more. Deprivation. The prevailing feeling was that this gold belonged to the people of Burkina Faso, and that its benefits should be fully invested in the development of the nation, a deep conviction that fueled the hope that, this time, the history of exploitation of African resources by foreign powers would not be repeated, and that the wealth generated would remain on African soil. To heal the wounds of the past and build a future of pride and autonomy, a dream that seemed, for the first time, within reach. And as the sun set over the Sahel, dyeing the sky in golden hues that seemed to mirror the newfound wealth beneath its feet, a new era seemed to dawn for Burkina Faso, an era of unlimited potential but also of immense challenges. For history teaches that great treasures can attract not only blessings but also greed and discord, an arduous path that would require wisdom, unity, and an unwavering determination to ensure that this gift of nature would translate into a lasting legacy of progress for all. Burkina Faso, a nation nestled in the heart of West Africa, has long made international headlines more for its hardships than its riches, a country marked by a history of political instability, with successive coups d'état undermining trust in institutions and hampering sustainable development, a reality that has made its people resilient but also deeply skeptical of promises of rapid change, yearning for a leadership that could finally bring lasting stability and progress. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's rise to power through a military coup that promised to restore national sovereignty and more effectively combat the jihadist insurgency ravaging vast swathes of the territory was met with a mix of hope and apprehension, both internally and externally. His youth and anti-imperialist rhetoric won him support from many, but also raised concerns about the country's diplomatic isolation and the sustainability of its assertive policies, especially vis-a-vis former colonial powers and Western partners. Economically, Burkina Faso faced colossal challenges, with subsistence agriculture vulnerable to climate change, an incipient industry and a chronic dependence on foreign aid to balance its accounts, a scenario that the massive discovery of gold promised to revolutionize, offering an unprecedented opportunity to diversify the economy, invest in productive sectors and significantly reduce poverty, transforming the country from a recipient of aid into a potential engine of regional growth, if resources were managed with prudence and vision. The fight against extremist Islamist groups affiliated with Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, which have spread across the Sahel like a cancer, claiming lives, displacing entire communities and undermining the authority of the state, has consumed a significant portion of the country's scarce resources, and the discovery of gold could, paradoxically, both finance a more effective fight against this threat and make the region even more attractive to these groups, which seek to control resource-rich territories to finance their operations, a complex dilemma for the government. The issue of sovereignty over natural resources has always been a sore point across Africa, with many nations feeling that even after political independence, the exploitation of their wealth continued to predominantly benefit foreign companies and corrupt elites, leaving little for local development, and the discovery in Burkina Faso has reignited the debate on the need for fairer contracts, greater transparency in the extractive industry and effective mechanisms to ensure that gold profits actually translate into tangible improvements in the lives of ordinary citizens. The Traoré government had already signaled a change in stance towards international partners, seeking to diversify its alliances and move away from the traditional influence of France, a decision that generated diplomatic tensions but was widely supported by a significant portion of the population, who saw the former colonial power as an obstacle to true independence. And the discovery of gold would certainly strengthen Traoré's position to negotiate on its own terms, seeking partners who respected Burkina Faso's sovereignty and offered more advantageous conditions. The country's institutional capacity to manage such sudden wealth of such magnitude was a legitimate concern, as history is replete with examples of nations that succumbed to the resource curse, where an abundance of oil or minerals led to corruption, mismanagement, runaway inflation and even internal conflicts, a fate that Burkina Faso would need to avoid at all costs by implementing robust mechanisms of governance, transparency and citizen participation in the management of funds from gold. The country's infrastructure, from roads and railways to the supply of energy and drinking water, was precarious and in urgent need of massive investment, and the resources from gold could finally make these essential projects viable, which would not only improve the quality of life of the population, but also create the necessary conditions for the development of other sectors of the economy, such as irrigated agriculture, the manufacturing industry and tourism, generating a virtuous cycle of growth and prosperity. Education and health, fundamental pillars for the human and social development of any nation, could also receive a transformative boost from the gold profits, enabling the construction of more schools and hospitals, the training of teachers and health professionals, and universal access to quality services, breaking the cycle of poverty and empowering future generations of Burkinabés to build an even brighter future for their country, an investment in human capital that would bring incalculable dividends. In this context of pre-existing challenges and a new and overwhelming opportunity, Ibrahim Traoré's leadership and the maturity of Burkina Faso's institutions would be tested as never before, as the nation found itself at a historic crossroads, with the potential to use this unexpected gift to rise from the ashes of instability and poverty, or to succumb to the pitfalls that great wealth often brings with it. A choice that would define its destiny for generations to come. The news of the colossal discovery of gold in Burkina Faso quickly spread across continents, and in the corridors of power of Western nations, what followed was described by attentive observers as a mixture of calculated surprise and poorly disguised panic, since the idea of an African nation, especially one with such an assertive and nationalist leadership as that of Ibrahim Traoré, assuming total control of mineral wealth of such magnitude, represented a potential upheaval in the power dynamics established for decades, breaking paradigms. The Western panic was not only due to the amount of gold, but to what this discovery meant in terms of autonomy and sovereignty for Burkina Faso, since a financially independent country, capable of dictating its own terms of development and choosing its international partners without the constraints of debt or dependence on aid, became a much less predictable and controllable actor on the complex global geopolitical board, a scenario that deeply worried the former colonial powers and the world's financial centers. For centuries, Western nations have benefited enormously from the exploitation of Africa's vast natural resources, often through unequal deals, corrupt local elites, and political influence that has guaranteed privileged access to minerals, oil, and other raw materials essential to their industries, and the prospect of Burkina Faso retaining most of the wealth generated by its own gold, and using it for its own development, threatened to break this historical pattern of extraction and dependence, causing palpable unease. The immediate concern for many Western mining corporations, which had operated in Burkina Faso and other African countries for years under often favorable conditions, was the possibility of renegotiating contracts, increasing royalties, or even nationalizing assets as Traoré's government, emboldened by new wealth, sought to secure a greater share of the profits for the state. A prospect that sent chills through stock markets and the boardrooms of large multinationals accustomed to a different environment. In addition to direct economic interests, there were also geopolitical fears that Burkina Faso, now with significantly greater bargaining power, might align itself more closely with rival Western powers such as Russia or China, which had already been expanding their influence in Africa by offering partnerships without the political conditionalities often imposed by Western donors. And the prospect of a gold-rich country in the Sahel becoming a strategic ally of Moscow or Beijing was seen as a significant setback for Western interests in the region. The stability of the global gold market was also a consideration, as the sudden influx of large new reserves could theoretically put downward pressure on prices, affecting the profits of established producers and the value of gold reserves held by Western central banks. Although many analysts argued that global demand for gold would remain robust, the uncertainty generated by the discovery in Burkina Faso was enough to cause nervousness in international financial circles, always averse to sudden changes. The media narrative, in some Western outlets, began to subtly question the Burkina Faso government's ability to manage such wealth, raising the specter of corruption, instability, and waste, a tactic that some African observers saw as echoing old colonial stereotypes and an attempt to undermine confidence in the nation's ability to self-determine, paving the way for possible intervention or the imposition of conditions that would secure external interests under the guise of good governance. Western diplomats, in private conversations, expressed concern about the impact the sudden wealth could have on the already fragile security situation in the Sahel, fearing that the gold could finance armed groups or exacerbate ethnic and regional tensions. Although Traoré's government repeatedly said the funds would be used to strengthen security and promote national unity, distrust persisted in some Western capitals, fueled by a long history of interventions and destabilization in Africa. There was also a fear, perhaps less publicly acknowledged, that Burkina Faso's example could inspire other resource-rich African nations to adopt more assertive stances towards the exploitation of their wealth, demanding a greater share of the profits and challenging the dominance of foreign companies, a contagion effect that could fundamentally reconfigure the relationship between Africa and the West, marking the end of an era of exploitation and the beginning of a new era of more equitable partnerships, or of greater confrontation. So the Western panic was multifaceted, a complex web of threatened economic interests, geopolitical fears of loss of influence, concerns about the stability of markets, and perhaps a deeper unease with the prospect of a truly sovereign Africa in control of its own destiny, a paradigm shift that the discovery of gold in Burkina Faso seemed to be accelerating in a dramatic and, for some, deeply disturbing way, signaling times of great transformation. The colossal discovery of gold in Burkina Faso was not just a domestic economic issue, but an event with the potential to profoundly reconfigure the regional and global geopolitical chessboard, sending shockwaves that would be felt from Washington to Beijing, from Paris to Moscow, as the emergence of a new resource-rich actor, especially in a region as strategic and volatile as the Sahel, inevitably altered the calculations of power and the dynamics of influence between the world's great powers. For the Sahel nations, neighboring Burkina Faso and also struggling with poverty, instability and the extremist threat, the news brought a mix of hope and apprehension. On the one hand, the prospect of a prosperous neighbor could generate positive spillovers, such as increased regional trade and greater security cooperation, but on the other, Burkina Faso's sudden wealth could exacerbate existing rivalries or attract even more greed from destabilizing actors, making the region an even greater focus of international competition. France, a former colonial power with deep historical ties and strategic interests in West Africa, saw its influence in the region increasingly challenged, and the rise of an economically independent and politically assertive Burkina Faso represented yet another challenge to its traditional role as gendarme and privileged partner, forcing Paris to recalibrate its approach and seek new forms of engagement that recognize the growing demand for sovereignty and more balanced partnerships on the part of African nations. The United States, with its interests focused on counterterrorism and containing the influence of rival powers in Africa, was watching developments closely, concerned that Burkina Faso's new wealth would fall into the wrong hands or that the country would align itself with adversaries such as Russia, which had already been expanding its military and political presence in the Sahel, offering security services and seeking access to natural resources, a competition that was transforming the region into a new arena for global rivalry. China, already Africa's largest trading partner and a major investor in infrastructure on the continent, saw the discovery of gold as an opportunity to deepen its ties with Burkina Faso, offering financing, technology and expertise to exploit the resources in exchange for access to the precious metal and greater political influence. An approach that many African countries found attractive because it did not come with the conditionalities often imposed by the West, but which also raised concerns about debt and dependency. Russia, seeking to reassert its status as a major global power and challenge the Western-led order, was stepping up its presence in Africa, especially in countries with military governments or in conflict with Western partners, and the prospect of a gold-rich Burkina Faso governed by a nationalist leader like Traoré, who had previously shown sympathy for Moscow, was seen as a strategic opportunity to expand its sphere of influence and secure access to valuable resources, worrying Western foreign ministries. The possibility for Burkina Faso to use its new wealth to build stronger regional alliances, based on African solidarity and the search for African solutions to African problems, also had the potential to alter the balance of power on the continent, strengthening Africa's voice in international forums and reducing dependence on external actors, a development that would be welcomed by many Pan-Africanists, but which could be viewed with suspicion by powers accustomed to dictating the direction of the global agenda. The competition for influence and access to Burkina Faso's resources could lead to a new form of scramble for Africa, with different powers offering investment packages, military cooperation, and diplomatic support in exchange for favors and privileged access to gold, a scenario that, if not managed shrewdly by the Burkinabe government, could turn the country into a pawn in a larger game rather than a sovereign actor capable of dictating its own terms and reaping the benefits of its wealth. The impact on global gold markets, while initially uncertain, could lead to increased volatility and a reassessment of investment strategies, with central banks and major funds closely monitoring Burkina Faso's ability to effectively extract and market its reserves, and the potential for new discoveries elsewhere in Africa or the world. A reminder that even a resource as old and prized as gold could still surprise and reshape global economic dynamics. Ultimately, the discovery of gold in Burkina Faso served as a powerful reminder that the geopolitical map is not static, and that unexpected events can quickly alter the balance of power, forcing nations and institutions to adapt to new realities. And in the heart of the Sahel, a nation once considered marginalized was suddenly in the global spotlight, with the potential to not only transform its own future, but also to influence the course of international relations in an increasingly multipolar and uncertain world. The sudden discovery of such vast mineral wealth placed Burkina Faso on a path fraught with both bright opportunities and daunting challenges, for world economic history is replete with examples of nations that, blessed with an abundance of natural resources, failed to translate this gift into sustainable development and prosperity for their people, falling into the trap known as the resource curse, a fate that the Traoré government and the Burkinabe people certainly wanted to avoid at all costs. The greatest opportunity, of course, lay in the potential to eradicate extreme poverty and significantly improve the quality of life of millions of citizens by investing the profits from gold in crucial sectors such as health, education, basic sanitation and infrastructure, creating a virtuous cycle of human and social development that could transform Burkina Faso into a model for other African nations, demonstrating that it is possible to break with the legacy of underdevelopment and build a future of dignity and well-being for all. Diversifying the economy away from over-reliance on a single sector such as subsistence agriculture was another key opportunity, as gold resources could finance the development of a local manufacturing industry, the processing of agricultural products, tourism and other sectors that generate employment and added value, making the Burkinabe economy more resilient to external shocks and able to offer more skilled and well-paid job opportunities to its growing young population. Strengthening national sovereignty, both political and economic, was perhaps the most coveted opportunity for the Traoré government, as the financial independence provided by gold would allow Burkina Faso to make its own decisions on domestic and foreign policies, choose its international partners based on its own interests, and resist undue pressure from foreign powers or international financial institutions, consolidating its position as a truly autonomous actor on the global stage, a long-cherished dream. However, the challenges were equally immense, and the first of these was the need to ensure transparent and responsible management of resources from gold, implementing robust mechanisms for monitoring, auditing and citizen participation to prevent wealth from being diverted by corruption, clientelism or mismanagement. A scourge that had already undermined the development potential of many resource-rich nations around the world, leaving a trail of disillusionment and poverty. The risk of runaway inflation, known as the Dutch disease, where the massive inflow of foreign currency from the export of a natural resource excessively values the local currency, making other sectors of the economy, such as agriculture and industry, less competitive on the international market, was a real threat that would need to be mitigated through prudent macroeconomic policies, such as the creation of sovereign wealth funds to manage wealth and sterilize part of the capital flows. Maintaining social and political stability in the face of such sudden wealth would also be a considerable challenge, as the prospect of access to large sums of money could exacerbate existing tensions between different ethnic or regional groups, fuel the greed of unscrupulous political actors or even finance armed groups seeking to control mining areas, requiring the government to have the capacity for dialogue, inclusion, and the use of force when necessary to ensure peace and national unity. Negotiating fair and equitable contracts with mining companies, whether domestic or foreign, would be crucial to ensuring that the Burkinabe state and its people receive a fair share of the profits generated by gold mining, avoiding the mistakes of the past where unfair deals disproportionately benefited corporations to the detriment of host countries, a task that would require technical expertise, negotiating skills, and unwavering political will on the part of the authorities. The development of skilled human capital, from geologists and mining engineers to financial managers and public policy experts, would be essential for Burkina Faso to effectively manage its new wealth and maximize its benefits. A long-term investment in education and vocational training that would prepare Burkinabes to assume leadership positions in the extractive industry and other sectors of the economy, while ensuring that knowledge and expertise remain in the country. Protecting the environment and mitigating the social impacts of mining activities, which often involve deforestation, soil and water contamination, and the displacement of communities, would be ethical and practical challenges that could not be neglected, requiring the implementation of rigorous environmental standards, transparent consultations with affected populations, and fair compensation mechanisms, to ensure that economic development does not occur at the expense of environmental sustainability and the well-being of local communities. In short, Burkina Faso found itself facing a mountain of gold that was also a mountain of responsibility, a unique opportunity that would require statesmanship, careful planning, citizen participation, and a collective determination to transform this gift of nature into a lasting legacy of prosperity, justice, and sovereignty. A historic test for a nation that yearned for a better future, and now had in its hands the tools to build it. The announcement of the massive gold discovery in Burkina Faso set off a series of events whose consequences are still unfolding, but it is already possible to glimpse a path forward, filled with crucial decisions for the Traoré government and significant repercussions for the global order, because what happens in a Sahelian nation, when such transformative wealth emerges, reverberates far beyond its borders, challenging old narratives and forging new realities. The first and most immediate task for the government of Burkina Faso will be to establish a robust legal and regulatory framework for the exploitation of this new wealth, ensuring that contracts are transparent, that benefits are maximized for the state and the people, and that environmental and social impacts are rigorously controlled, a process that will require broad consultations with civil society, experts, and potential investors, seeking a balance between attracting capital and protecting national interests. Choosing international partners to assist in gold exploration and processing will be a geopolitically charged decision, with Burkina Faso likely to seek to diversify its options beyond traditional players, and possibly considering offers from China, Russia, Middle Eastern countries, or even other African nations with expertise in the sector. A strategy that could increase its bargaining power but will also require a careful assessment of the risks and benefits of each potential alliance. The reaction of Western powers will continue to be a determining factor, and if the initial panic translates into attempts at destabilization, excessive diplomatic pressure, or the imposition of unfavorable conditions, this could push Burkina Faso further into the arms of rival powers, creating a cycle of mistrust and confrontation, whereas a more constructive approach, based on respect for sovereignty and support for good governance, could pave the way for new forms of mutually beneficial cooperation. The example of Burkina Faso, if successful in transforming its mineral wealth into sustainable development and strengthened sovereignty, could have a profound impact across the African continent, inspiring other resource-rich nations to renegotiate their own terms with foreign investors, to demand greater transparency and accountability in the management of their wealth, and to seek more endogenous development models centered on the interests of their own people, accelerating Africa's process of economic emancipation. In the long term, managing gold-based funds will require the creation of solid and independent institutions, such as a sovereign wealth fund, to invest resources strategically in long-term development projects, save for future generations, and protect the economy from fluctuations in commodity prices, a complex task that will require forward thinking, fiscal discipline, and an unwavering commitment to the public interest, above any private or short-term interests. Burkinabe civil society will have a crucial role to play in monitoring the management of gold resources, demanding transparency, participation, and accountability from the government and the companies involved, as only an active and vigilant citizenry can ensure that this wealth is not wasted or diverted, and that the benefits effectively reach every corner of the country, transforming the lives of the most vulnerable communities and building a more just and equitable society. Security will remain a pressing challenge, and the Traoré government will need to ensure that mining areas are protected from armed groups and illegal activities, and that the wealth generated by gold does not become a new flashpoint for conflict, but rather a tool to strengthen defense and security forces, promote national reconciliation, and build lasting peace in a region long plagued by violence and instability. The global narrative around Africa and its resources could also be influenced by this event, challenging stereotypes of a continent as perpetually dependent and in need, and highlighting Africa's potential to be an engine of global growth, an equal partner, and a central actor in shaping its own future. A shift in perspective that is fundamental to building fairer and more balanced international relations in the 21st century. The legacy of this gold discovery in Burkina Faso will be written by the choices that are made in the years to come, the battles that are fought, and the visions that prevail. But one thing is certain: the ground of the Sahel has shaken, and the world is watching closely, for in the golden glow emanating from deep within the African earth lies not only the promise of material wealth, but also the seed of profound political, economic, and social transformation, with the potential to echo for generations. As the morning sun illuminates a new day over Burkina Faso, the nation stands on the threshold of an extraordinary journey, a journey that could lead to the redemption of a difficult past and the building of a future where hope is not just a distant dream, but a tangible reality, forged in the hard work of its people and the wealth that the land has generously offered. A chapter of history that is only just beginning to be written, with letters of gold and determination. If this story about the monumental discovery of gold in Burkina Faso and its profound implications for the world has piqued your interest, and your desire to better understand the complex dynamics that shape our planet, then I invite you to become an active part of our community. Subscribe to our channel to continue receiving in-depth analyses and engaging stories like this one. Leave a like if you enjoyed the journey we took together today, and most importantly, share your thoughts, questions, and reflections in the comments below. Your engagement is what drives us to always seek more, to dig deeper in search of the truth.